Mr. Douglas, Mr. Blazier, people represented by Mr. Kelberg and Mr. Lynch.
I think we have Mr. Darden back.
Mr. Darden's back there with the doctor. Morning, counsel.
Morning, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Kelberg, you've relocated the easel.
We have, Your Honor. I will point out for the court, again, my eyesight is not a good test, but because we have moved it back for the juror, I don't know the numbers, I apologize, but the juror who is seated in the first chair in the back row, and probably the juror next to that juror, and possibly the juror in the front seat of the first seat of the front row, the distance is a factor. To see the clarity of these wounds, especially the smaller wounds, from that position, I think it's very difficult. The alternative is, I would perhaps to ask the court to ask the jurors, obviously pointing out that the court has moved the photographs back, but in the event the jurors feel a need to see the photographs at a closer inspection, that the court will make that available. My suggestion would be when I have finished with a board completely, that the jurors be given an opportunity, as I understand they were with certain of the DNA exhibits, to basically walk in front of the exhibit and have an opportunity to examine it for some brief period of time.
All right, any comment, Mr. Shapiro?
No, Your Honor.
All right. All right, Deputy McNair. I'm sorry.
Oh, just a procedural thing. Our answer to a future trivia question of who operated the Elmo at the O.J. Simpson trial is sick. And I indicated to Mr. Fairtlow that he should go home and not infect anyone else down here, and more importantly, take care of himself. We have not used the Elmo over the last couple of days. I do not anticipate using it in this morning's examination. If it comes up and it has to be used, we'll just make do without it until Monday.
Well, what we'll do is we have Mr. Simpson's counsel and their staff have the ability to operate the Elmo, and I think as a professional courtesy, they'll be happy to do that for you.
We'd appreciate it. Thanks very much, Your Honor.
All right. That's just a matter of courtesy amongst counsel.
Oh, and they have been very courteous throughout to myself and Mr. Williams.
All right. Deputy I'm sorry, Mr. Carpenter, you had one other matter you wanted to address?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Good morning, sir.
There's two matters. Good morning, Your Honor. Your Honor, I would like to propose, if the court pleases, in view of the high emotions that were in the court yesterday and the problems we had at the end of the day, that the court consider giving I have a proposed instruction for the autopsy photographs, and it's very brief, and I think the court would not have a problem with it. I think it's appropriate to read that this morning before we launch into the testimony.
All right. Have you given Mr. Kelberg a copy?
No, Your Honor, I just had it sent here, and I will be glad to share it with Mr. Kelberg. Is to indicate...
Do you only have one copy of that?
Yes, only one copy. I'm glad to make a copy.
All right. Why don't you have Mr. Lee make us some copies, Mrs. Robertson?
While they're doing that, Your Honor, I have one other matter I wanted to indicate to the court. We previously had a conversation with regard to the scheduling on Monday, and I would just propose to the court that I think, as the court indicated, we would perhaps meet half-day, depending upon how far we get today, and I would anticipate that people will still be in direct examination and still be using these photographs, and Monday being an important day to everyone, it would seem to me that it may be an appropriate day not to have testimony for the jury, and I'd like to propose that to the court, that for all the victims that we take the balance of Monday off and perhaps use Monday for any motions the court might want to hear. And I propose that if the court pleases. I think that given the high emotions that we saw yesterday and the fact that we'll still be in the middle of the coroner's testimony, it'll be really a tough time for everyone, and I would just throw that out for the court's thinking. So we're going to do half-day at any rate.
Mr. Kelberg, any thoughts on that proposal?
Your Honor, I think probably every day is a tough day for everyone who's associated with this case, from the families of Mr. Goldman and Ms. Brown Simpson, families of Mr. Simpson, the counsel, the court, the jurors. Quite frankly, I believe the sooner this case gets to the jury, the happier this jury will be. And I believe that if there is time available that can be used, then the time should be used. Whether it's the anniversary of the event, the anniversary of any funeral associated with the killings of these two human beings, there is going to be some memory arising from this incident that is going to be commemorated during the next month or a month and a half. And I think it would be wiser to move forward than it is to acknowledge and give some sense of importance which may have an influence that it should not have. So on that basis, I would prefer to try and do something with the jury in any time that's available. We do appreciate the court's consideration in allowing Dr. Lakshmanan to attend this international symposium to which he was committed many months ago. So I realize with the court's indulgence, we are asking the court not to go in the morning, and with that understanding, I would not find it inappropriate for the court to accede to Mr. Cochran's request, but I, in a more generalized sense, believe that the time should be used as quickly and as efficiently and as effectively as possible to get this case to the jury for decision.
May I respond just briefly, Your Honor?
Yes.
Well, as the court is aware, the defense has indicated to the court that not only do we want to work long hours and accede to you in response to our letter, but we'd be willing to work on Saturdays where that's possible. We want to do that also. And I might say to my learned colleague that one of the ways we get this case to the jury faster is to, speed up the testimony. And the direct examination has been very lengthy, but that's their decision. So we want to do that also. The reason we're not going to be here in the morning is because the doctor has another event. I thought about this last night, Your Honor, in view of the fact that it is a difficult day for all the victims in this case on Monday. We're going to be off half day. We have other things we can do. I'm not asking for us to be off. I'm saying that you may give us some, we have motions that are pending we could perhaps deal with. But I'm saying just given the motions that we saw the other day, this court's very wise, and I think the court would consider that, we should consider that rather than coming in at 1:30. Since it is June 12th, and I think it will be a more difficult day for everyone. And so we want to move this case along and get it to the jury as soon as possible. Shifting gears, Your Honor, with regard to the proposed autopsy photos and what we saw yesterday, all we're asking is that if the court would instruct the jurors as follows, that as you've seen, the autopsy photographs introduced by the prosecution yesterday are extremely gruesome and disturbing. Try to use the court's words. In carrying out your duties as jurors, you must not be swayed by sentiment, conjecture, passion, or prejudice, taken from the jury instructions, I think. But both the people and the defendant have a right to expect that you will abide by the presumption of innocence, that you will conscientiously and dispassionately consider and weigh all the evidence without letting your emotions sway your judgment. When the case is eventually sent to you for deliberations, you will find the defendant not guilty unless the prosecution has proven his guilt or this case beyond a reasonable doubt. And what we try to do is incorporate what the law is in paragraph Calgic number 1.00 with 2.90, and we think this would be the appropriate time to give this instruction in view of the fact of the overwhelming emotions we saw in court yesterday, Your Honor.
Mr. Kelber?
Yes, Your Honor. There is certainly a first issue of do we need it at this stage? I'll leave that to the court's discretion. The court has observed this jury much longer than I, and the court obviously saw very clearly what the reactions were of the jurors. If the court's inclined to give any kind of limited instruction to the jury, let me start with the first sentence, which in my judgment is a characterization of the photographs, which is A, inaccurate, B, incomplete, and C, an invasion of the province of the jury to decide what they are. It is not unusual for defense counsel in a motion under 352 dealing with autopsy photographs to argue that the photographs are, quote, gruesome, unquote, in an effort to convince a court that by being gruesome, the photograph should be excluded as prejudicial because it may influence the sympathies or emotions of the jurors in a way unrelated to the probative value of the evidence. Here we have added, let me be correct for Mr. Shapiro's benefit, I believe it's an adverb, extremely, not an adjective. So he has enhanced the nature of the gruesomeness argument by that characterization. And disturbing. Disturbing carries many different connotations. These photographs, I believe, are disturbing in a way that I don't think is intended by Mr. Cochran's suggested admonition. They are disturbing because of what they show happened to Ronald Goldman, and the other photographs as what they show to Nicole Brown Simpson, and they're extremely probative in our judgment as to who in fact killed these people. That's for the jury to decide. I would submit to the court that if you are to give an instruction, you can frame it in terms of how the court first forewarned this jury about we were moving into this phase, we were going to see photographs, if anybody has any problems and so forth, they were to let the court know and so forth, and then read the 1.00 instruction, which is indicated on page 2 of the document that Mr. Cochran has given to me. After you give that generalized reflection of the nature of the evidence that the jury was to hear and has been hearing for the last few days, and of course to leave out what is included in the last portion of the proposed admonition or limited instruction, beginning with the words, and when the case is eventually sent to you for deliberations, that you will find the defendant not guilty unless the prosecution has proven his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That is an admonition I assume this court has read to this jury at some point in either voir dire or the 4 opening statements. The presumption of innocence instruction 2.90, I'm sure this jury understands quite clearly that the burden is on the prosecution to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty of the charges before they can convict him and before his presumption of innocence is lost. But for the purposes of their reaction to these photographs, 1.00 fully and unambiguously conveys what is the necessary purpose, if there is one, for a limited instruction. That is, this jury must decide the case objectively and not on the basis of emotion or passion or prejudice as to either side. So if the court is inclined to give a limited instruction or admonition, I believe that 1.00 fully and clearly provides that admonition, along with an introductory remark similar in nature to what the court has said on several occasions to this jury with respect to this area of the testimony.
May I respond just briefly, Your Honor?
Yes.
We're not really that far apart, Mr. Kohlberg and I think that basically what we've done is use the court's words. I'd want to put things in perspective, Your Honor. We're in a different posture now. The court did indicate to the jurors that the photographs, I believe, used the word disturbing or some word similar to that, that they could raise their hands at any time. And in fact, the juror number 5 did in fact do that yesterday, as I brought to the court's attention. So we've now had that situation. These photos have had an effect upon the jury. They have been disturbing, they have been gruesome, and they are gruesome. And I won't quarrel over any adverbs, but photographs are gruesome and disturbing. Those are factual statements. We use the court's words. The rest of it is 1.00 pretty much, a jury instruction, which I think the court would want to give in this situation. This is a unique situation. We're still concerned about a fair trial here. The reason why we objected to these photographs, Your Honor, was so that the passion and prejudice that might inure these photographs would then be to the detriment of the defendant and would cause us not to receive a fair trial, and the court wants a fair trial above all else. So I'm just asking the court to put us back on track in that regard. You've taken safeguards in that regard. Further, who can quarrel with 2.90? I mean, how many times in a trial can you say the defendant has to be proved guilty beyond a reasonable doubt? And that's all we're talking about, especially in view of the fact that the prosecution was allowed to ask a hypothetical question about somebody 6'2", 200 pounds. Well, I'm sure Dr. If asked that question, will say that somebody 5'6", 150 could have done the same damage. And so that, they focus on a particular question, and then it inures to the detriment of our client. We have an obligation to bring that to the court's attention. And all we're asking is for fundamental fairness, as you've done yesterday at court, and moving the photographs back. That's all we're asking. And so I would ask the court to give this instruction, or an instruction very close to this instruction now, and to consider my other request with regard to June 12th. It's not a holiday for us. We're willing to work, but I just think given the emotions and given everything we know and the fact they have a problem in the morning, it seems to make sense to me, Your Honor. Thank you very kindly.
Thank you. All right, counsel, the record does reflect that the court has previously already read to this jury in pre-instructions at the beginning of the case 1.00 and 2.90. However, I think that given the unique situation that we find ourselves in today, I will instruct the jurors when they return to the courtroom as follows. In evaluating the evidence presented in this case, you must not be influenced by mere sentiment, conjecture, sympathy, passion, prejudice, public opinion, or public feeling. Both the prosecution and the defendant have a right to expect that you will conscientiously consider and weigh the evidence, apply the law, and reach a just verdict regardless of the consequences. And that is the last two sentences out of 1.00. As to the request to be not dark, but not have the jury in session on the afternoon of Monday, June 12th, I'm going to decline that invitation. We will be here, the court will be here, conducting other activities regarding this case Monday morning, and I would like to complete the doctor's testimony as soon as possible. All right.
Let me approach this one a minute.
Sure. All right, let's have the jury, please. All right, let the record reflect that we have been rejoined by all the members of our jury panel. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, in evaluating the evidence that is presented to you in this case, I want to instruct you that you must not be influenced by mere sentiment, conjecture, sympathy, passion, prejudice, public opinion, or public feeling. Both the prosecution and the defendant have a right to expect that you will conscientiously consider and weigh the evidence, apply the law, and reach a just verdict in this case, regardless of the consequences. All right, Mr. Kellberg, are you ready to proceed?
I am, Your Honor.
All right, doctor, would you resume the witness stand, please? Record should reflect that Dr. Lakshmanan is again on the witness stand undergoing direct examination by Mr. Kellberg. Good morning, doctor. Doctor, sir, you were reminded that you are still under oath, and Mr. Kellberg, you may continue with your direct examination. And ladies and gentlemen, I've asked Mr. Kelberg to move some of the exhibits that will be shown to you, just so that it's not too close and in your face. But given the detail of some of the evidence that will be presented, it may be necessary, or you may feel it necessary, to have a closer look at some point in time. When we have concluded the direct examination, if any of you feel that you want the opportunity to have a closer look at any of the exhibits, we'll have an opportunity for that. All right? Mr. Kelberg.
Thank you, Your Honor. Doctor, I'm going to actually ask, with the court's permission, you step down because I want to use a different photograph board for a brief series of questions and then return to the board that we were looking at yesterday afternoon. Your Honor, I have a board of photographs entitled Possible Sources for Ron Goldman's Blunt Force Trauma Injuries. May this be marked as People's 359, I believe we're at.
Yes. Mr. Kelberg.
Thank you, Your Honor. Doctor, inviting your attention to this board of photographs, Exhibit 359. Are you familiar in general terms with the areas?
Proceed.
Are you familiar in general terms with the areas shown in these photographs?
Yes, I am.
Doctor, do the photographs show various parts of the area of 875 South Bundy where Mr. Goldman's body was found?
Yes.
Doctor, did you examine in some detail that area when you visited either of the two times you testified you visited the 875 South Bundy location?
Yes.
With what degree of detail did you examine that area?
Basically, I looked for all the plant and other
Keep your voice up, please.
plant and other structures which were there in the crime scene. I saw the space available in the area where the victim was found. I felt the surfaces of the various structures there.
Structures such as
The tree surface, the railing surface, and also looked at the plant sapling with a support post, which I saw, and also I paid attention to certain stumps of stalks of the plants, which looked as though this particular plant was already removed, with the stumps of the stalks still left in place. And also, when I looked at the tree, I saw the tree branches also had been cut, and there were also similar areas of cut stalks on the tree branches. The other thing I did is also I saw a rough idea about the distance between the tree stump and the tree, the sapling and the stump, the railing and the sapling with the support post, and also a brief evaluation of the distance between the tree and the front railing, because you have a railing in the front, a side railing in the on the side, which separates this residence from the next. I looked at the gate area. I looked at the walkway. I looked at the steps.
The steps that we saw in the earlier series?
You can see a portion of it in S3 here. And I also saw the wall and the opposite this area, opposite this stair area.
For the record, an area opposite the area shown in the lower left-hand corner of photograph S3 on our Exhibit 359?
Yes.
Doctor, one of the reasons you did that examination was, as the title of the board is, to look for possible sources for Mr. Goldman's blunt force trauma injuries?
Yes.
Was another purpose to assess the actual size and space available in this area where Mr. Goldman's body was found?
Yes, because I did mention earlier, I had a rough estimation of the distance between the various structures I just alluded to.
Doctor, in forming an opinion as to how quickly Mr. Goldman could have received all of the sharp force injuries and blunt force trauma you've identified from your review he sustained, does the space that's available for the victim enter into your opinion?
Yes,
In what way?
because when you have a assailant who is wielding a sharp weapon and is also doing thrusting elements, the victim naturally will try to escape. That is the normal response to anybody. If you don't have a weapon, or you do have, you try and escape if somebody who's more overpowering than you or even equal size of you. So if you don't have space, it naturally allows the assailant to deliver all the blows to the target being the victim. So if you have an enclosed space, you don't have much space to move. And that will be a factor. That means if you, let's say the assailant thrusts several times on the victim,
Thrust meaning what, doctor?
wielding the weapon and trying to stab you, or as we saw the sharp force injuries, if you have a confined space, you don't have much space to move. So all the thrusts will probably be delivered on the victim. The possibility increases for all the thrusts which are delivered. That's one possibility. The space is important.
In this particular situation, doctor, how would you characterize the space surrounding the area where Mr. Goldman's body was found?
It's a very confined space. I went in, that's why I went twice. I went once in November and went again this year to get a good idea about how much space there is. There's not much space. And that was one of the principal surprises I had, because when I saw the photographs, it looks as though there's a lot of space, but when I went there, there's not much space.
Doctor, is that of significance to you when you formed an opinion, as you testified yesterday, that all of these injuries to Mr. Goldman could have been inflicted in less than a minute?
Yes, that was one of the considerations I had.
Why?
Because of the confined space, and I felt that the injuries sustained could have been in rapid succession, and I just said that's a minimum time, I said, if I recall. And it could have happened within a minute, given the space constraints you have and the number of injuries you have, especially if you have a sharp injury like a knife.
Doctor, is there anything else you want to add at this point regarding the space limitation with respect to any opinion on how quickly these injuries could have been inflicted on Mr. Goldman?
Not at this time.
Doctor, before we take this board down, though, but in a similar vein, and I'd asked you some questions, I think, on Nicole Brown Simpson when you were talking about how quickly injuries could have been inflicted. Among the factors you consider in forming an opinion for how quickly the injuries could have been inflicted, does that include, number one, the relative sizes between the perpetrator and the victim?
That would be one factor which is always a consideration in any assault or altercation.
In general, doctor, in your opinion, would a larger perpetrator, that is a perpetrator who is bigger than the victim, tend to decrease the amount of time necessary for all wounds to be inflicted, all other considerations being equal?
That's always a possibility.
Doctor, do you take into account the relative physical condition between the perpetrator and the victim in forming an opinion as to how quickly all of the injuries can be inflicted?
Isn't that vague? Physical condition.
All right. Doctor, do you take into account whether or not the perpetrator is a person who has worked out, for example, and is physically fit, muscular, agile, and so forth, in deciding whether or not a set of injuries can be inflicted, relatively speaking, more quickly or to take longer?
Objection. Assumes facts, not evidence.
Oral.
You may answer the question, doctor.
I already said if the size of the assailant is known, I mean, that will be, that's always another factor which should be taken into consideration, because naturally a weaker victim with a stronger assailant, is more chance that the victim would receive the injuries than with a same-size assailant.
I'm not talking just about size. That was my first area of inquiry, but I'm talking now about, in general, physical fitness and strength, relatively speaking, between perpetrator and victim.
Well, that will support opinions wherein I indicated partial immobilization of the victim and when some of the injuries were inflicted, and that would support that theory.
That the injuries were inflicted in a shorter period of time rather than a longer period of time?
Yes, because I also indicated in an opinion yesterday that one possible scenario was that, given the injuries we have, that they could have been partially immobilized.
And that was when you did a demonstration with your left arm bent and around my upper chest area?
For Ron, and I also indicated that when I saw the 4 localized stab wounds to the left side of the neck on Miss Nicole, there also I indicated there was partial immobilization possible because it is one localized area. So for that, a larger victim with a larger assailant with a smaller victim, that theory would favor that.
Doctor, does the element of surprise, if that element exists, that is, the victim not anticipating an attack and an attacker who in fact anticipates making the attack, enter into the formulation of how long a set of injuries may take to be inflicted in a situation such as this?
Surprise is an element, and as I indicated earlier when I discussed Nicole's finding, there's a paucity of defense wounds. I said she could be rapidly incapacitated or incapable of resistance, and there your hypothetical that of element of surprise would play a role. I mean, if somebody is surprised and don't know somebody is attacking them, there's less chance of resistance. I'm just giving a support for your hypothetical theory.
Doctor, assuming that Mr. Goldman was coming to the residence of Nicole Brown Simpson for the purpose of delivering some glasses that had been left by Ms. Brown Simpson's mother at a restaurant earlier that evening, and had not anticipated that there would be any kind of physical altercation with anyone whatsoever, would that enter into your consideration as to how long this set of injuries would take to be inflicted?
I already indicated that also would be a surprise element there, but if Mr. Goldman, Mr. Goldman did sustain these injuries in this area, I think the more important factor is that if Mr. Goldman was confronted by the assailant in this confined area, he has no place to escape, especially if he's cornered between that railing and the tree and that sapling. He's stuck there, especially if somebody's wielding a knife, or which is, we know because of all the sharp force injuries, you're cornered. And plus the element of surprise, which you have brought up in your hypothetical situation, is another factor which could would support the theory which I opined yesterday, that these injuries could have been inflicted in a minute's time. A minute is a long time. I mean, we all heat our coffee cups in the microwave oven, and it takes a long time. 1 minute is a long time, and you're talking about 14 or 15 sharp force injuries in each of them. And even if you take 1 minute and you divide it by the number of injuries, you're talking about several seconds for an injury. It doesn't take that long to do a sharp force injury with a sharp knife.
And does it take very long, doctor, to do a series of them if the person is motivated to do that to a victim?
Not at all. Not at all, because you're talking about a very sharp instrument, and we all have shave every day and we cut without our knowledge. And if somebody wants to stab you or cut you, you can do it in a short time. And I have no, when I opined yesterday day for Nicole and yesterday for Ron, I said the minimum time could be a minute. You could do it in a minute, but it could also be several minutes. But I won't be surprised if it is done in a minute. That's all I said.
Or less than a minute, I think
Yes.
were your actual words?
Yes. I mean, if you take a knife and you just plunge it, you take any knife, just go home and plunge it quickly, and you'll see you can do 15 thrusts in about 15 seconds.
I don't think, well, for the record, Your Honor, Dr. Lakshmanan took his right hand, clenched as if holding, I assume, a knife, and went up and down about 4 times, perhaps, in a complete cycle of up and down movements in a period that appeared to be just several seconds,
Seemed like 5 or 8 seconds.
whatever the court's counting is. But I assume the court will admonish everyone not to go home and attempt to do what Dr. Lakshmanan suggested one could do if one went home.
Thank you.
Doctor, does the motivation of the perpetrator, that is, how motivated the perpetrator is to see that this person is killed by sharp force injury, enter into how quickly all of these sharp force injuries can be inflicted?
I mean, that would always be a factor too.
In what way?
If somebody wants to hurt you, they're going to try and hurt you. And especially if they got you confined in a small place like this and you can't escape, you're going to be hurt. I'm just giving, these are all possibilities, if you know the motivation of the person.
Doctor, but as a forensic pathologist, do you take into account these kinds of factors before you render an opinion based on your review of the pathology, the photographs from the autopsy and so forth?
Yes, in this case, I took into consideration the scene circumstances, and if you have the factors of motivation, that would also support my opinion that these injuries could have been inflicted as in less than a minute.
Doctor, anything else that we need from this board at this time regarding this subject matter?
No.
I think we're done with this, but I'd suggest counsel maybe they could just part long enough for us to put this one back and get a different board out.
Mr. Kalberg, which board are you picking out?
It's going to be 358. I believe that's the board we marked yesterday at the near the end of the day, Your Honor.
All right. All right, we've confirmed that's 358.
It is, Your Honor.
All right, proceed.
Doctor, I want to invite your attention for a moment to the photographs G40, G55, and we'll start with G37 with respect to what you described as injury number 2 from photograph G37. And again, you're not suggesting by your numbering scheme necessarily the order that any injury was received. Is that correct?
No. This numbering was only done for purposes of convenience so that we can accurately correlate a injury with a photograph. They do not reflect sequence of infliction.
And that's how you correlated them in your chart that is our Exhibit 351 by calling them injury number 1, injury number 2, and so forth.
That's correct, and I also correlated it to the area in which you have that description in the original report, in the addendum, in the diagram, etc.
Understood. The lower superficial incise wound number 2 injury in G37 you testified is also seen in G55. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that seems to end where there is another sharp force injury seen. Is that correct?
Yes.
And looking at G40, does that show basically a continuation of what we see in G55, but this time with the head being rotated towards a 90-degree angle so that the full back of the neck and head area is exposed?
Yes. This penetrating sharp force injury is the same injury you see here in the back, and it extends as a cut from that penetrating portion.
Keep your voice up, doctor.
From that penetrating portion.
Doctor, can you determine from looking at G55 and or G40 whether this superficial incise wound, injury number 2, actually ends where it appears to come in contact with this next sharp force injury you just described?
The superficial incise wound ends right in the sharp force injury, so this particular injury could have continued as being this penetrating sharp force injury, or the sharp force injury could have been superimposed on this superficial incise cut here in the right side of the neck.
I want to get some clarification from you if I could. When we look at G55 and G40 with respect to the lower superficial incise wound, is it accurate to say that we may not be seeing where that wound actually ended at the time it was inflicted?
That's correct.
Why not?
As I told you, there could have been this sharp force penetrating injury could have superimposed that cut, so you won't be able to see where this injury ends. The other possibility is that this particular wound was continued as a sharp force penetrating injury.
Let's start with your first hypothesis, and I want to, in essence, as a lay definition of what you have been saying, would it be accurate to say that this second superficial incise wound could have continued into the area where in photograph G40 we actually see this next sharp force injury that you're talking about?
Yes.
Excuse me, Mr. Kelber, when you reach across the exhibit, I think you're blocking 165's view of the, I don't know if he can actually see what it is you're directing your
All right.
attention to.
Let me try on this side, Your Honor. Can I move one of the, I know that bailiffs need to have a cord, or can I move one of these maybe to the back there?
All right, Deputy Jacks, would you just grab that for me, please?
That was my exercise for the day. Doctor, what I was asking you about is, in lay terms, would it be accurate to say that one possibility is, and now I'm not sure the doctor may be blocking the view of, that this lower superficial incise wound, when it was inflicted, actually continued for some distance, which is no longer visible because it's been covered by this other sharp force injury?
Yes, that's what I said.
That's one possibility.
Yes.
And is there any way, from looking at the photograph or any of the materials you've reviewed, that you can make a determination whether that in fact occurred?
No, I cannot.
Is there any way you would have expected at autopsy Dr. Golden to be able, by dissection in any particular manner or any other technique, to have made that determination?
No.
You have to keep your voice
No.
up. Why not?
Because it's very difficult to try to describe an injury which has been altered by a second injury which completely alters the primary injury.
When you say alters, what?
Because when you have another penetrating injury on an area of a cut and there's a penetration, you won't be able to describe the previous existing injury, especially when the secondary injury is larger than the primary injury.
And in this case, you would describe this last wound that you've been talking about as a secondary injury?
If that's what took place.
All right. And the primary under this set of circumstances would be the lower superficial incise wound?
Yes.
All right. Let's then go through what is the second alternative you were saying?
The second alternative is that this wound itself, at this point, as I mentioned earlier, this was a superficial cut made, and at this point, a penetration of the same knife took place.
Can you perhaps use a ruler and use me and demonstrate for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you mean? And I think you're going to want to be on my right side. Is that correct, Doctor?
As I said, it's coming like this, and when it came to the back, there's been some movement as any penetration could have taken place.
For the,
this.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. For the
You could have
record,
done a penetration here.
for the record, the doctor put his left arm again bent at the elbow. Doctor, could you get back into position?
Yes.
Left arm bent at the elbow around my upper chest area. He took the ruler, and with his right hand, he drew the ruler horizontally across my neck to a point where he stopped it, starting in the back of the right side of my neck, and then I'm not sure how the record reflects this, but he pressed the end of the ruler in contact with the right side of my neck in an inward direction.
Yes, that's an accurate description.
Doctor, are you able, from a medical standpoint, to offer an opinion as to which of these alternative hypothetical circumstances occurred in this actual case?
I would favor the demonstration I did because it seems to come right there and then there's a penetration. That would be my favored opinion, but you can never tell what really happened.
From the medical evidence alone?
Yes.
Doctor, I'm not sure that we finished. May I step just briefly to the other side now? I'm not sure that we finished talking about all of the, I would call them perhaps ancillary aspects of this stab wound, complex stab, incise wound you talked about on G51. You talked, I believe, about there was an abrasion associated with it.
Yes.
And there was also something about a cut.
A cut on the lower inferior margin here, right here.
Did we discuss the significance of any of that cut to you?
No, we didn't discuss that yet.
All right, Mr. Governor, if I could ask the doctor to keep his personal notes, his set of notes, either with him or...
Okay.
There we go. Thank you.
Keep this.
Proceed.
Doctor, what, if any, significance does that cut in that injury have for you?
If you look at, you can see the cut very well in G37. And actually, the lower incise wound, which I described as injury number 2, could have been a part of this cut. But there seems to be some interruption in the skin here between the cut and the injury number 2. So there's a possibility that this could have been part of the same wound with an interruption in the cut. The other possibility is that when this penetrating sharp force injury took place, this could have been a cut which could have been part of this particular incise wound.
Dr. again, you use me as Mr. Goldman and a ruler and demonstrate what you mean with respect to these alternatives.
Yeah, and maybe the same demonstration could be used to go over how one possible way this deep sharp force injury to the left side of the neck could have occurred, given the directions which we have in the autopsy report.
Before you start, just for the record, that was photograph G37, and the doctor was pointing to the what I believe he's described as injury number 3 on that photograph.
Yes.
The same immobilization, you have the superficial cut here, and in this part, this could have been the penetration going this way. That is, I don't want to hurt you.
I would appreciate that, doctor.
Penetration going this way, which would fit the direction which we have, because this particular wound, this deep sharp force injury, goes up, and that's the one which transects the internal jugular vein on the left side, and also shares a common path with this sharp force injury, which is a separate wound seen in G53, behind the ear.
Doctor, can you, again, go back in position so that we can state for the record what you did? Again, Your Honor, for the record, the doctor with his left hand bent at the elbow around my upper chest and with his right hand holding a ruler to represent a knife, has pressed the ruler against the left side of my neck in the general area where injury number 3 is depicted in photograph G37, and again, he pressed in an inward direction when he held it at that position.
Yeah. And
may the record so report?
Yes.
And I described yesterday that this is a complex injury, so this could be only one penetrating component of that complex injury.
What does that mean, doctor?
That is, we have a penetration, and what I'm saying is, looking at the injury, when I discussed it yesterday, that there was more than one penetration involved there, and twisting and turning of the weapon or the victim when that injury was inflicted. So, though this could have been one penetration, there could have been a second penetration later.
And is there any way is there any way that you, as a forensic pathologist at autopsy, would be expected to distinguish that alternative of a second or multiple penetrations of that area from a single penetration?
I've already said it is multiple penetration or complex twisting, but I won't be able to tell how it exactly occurred.
Doctor, I want to cover the complex twisting component, though. If it is a complex twisting component, is that consistent with a single stab to that area?
A single stab can result in complex injury with twisting of the weapon, or the victim trying to wrestle himself or herself away. Wrestling himself or herself away. But you can also have complex injury from second, third penetrations, which could be separate from the initial penetration.
I'd like to demonstrate, if you can, Doctor, again using me as Mr. Goldman, what you mean by the twisting or turning with respect to both the weapon and with respect to the victim.
Victim, you have to...
You tell me what to do, and I will do it.
When I'm holding the weapon, you should wrestle yourself away from me.
Wrestle in the fashion of turning my head?
Just try to escape from me. See, you can get different type of wound from that kind of... I mean, I don't know whether that's how Mr. Goldman tried to wrestle himself away, but I just wanted to demonstrate that the stabbing process, the cutting process is not a fixed process. It's a dynamic process. You have a dynamic process of the victim trying to escape, the assailant trying to inflict the injury, plus there is also rotation of the movement. So there are a lot of factors to be kept in mind. So the opinions have to be couched to keep that in mind.
For the record, can we get back into position just so we can try and establish for the record what happened with this last demonstration? Doctor, would you start again where you were? For the record, Your Honor, again, the doctor with his left arm bent at the elbow and around my upper chest with a ruler held in his right hand to represent a knife and pressed against the area of my left neck that is depicted in the photograph, then asked me to try and wrestle myself away. I pulled forward and to the right away from the doctor, and at that time the ruler was dragged, if you will, I don't know if that's the right word, but it moved across the right side of my neck as I moved to the right and away from the doctor.
Noted.
Doctor, did we complete a discussion of the cut aspect that you were talking about you saw in the wound?
No. This particular sharp force injury also extends as a cut. And this could have occurred when the knife was being withdrawn, and also could have been from the victim wrestling himself away or himself away in this situation.
Would you keep your voice up?
Himself away in this situation.
Doctor, in a similar manner to what you just demonstrated with me?
Yes.
Doctor, I want to come back to this particular wound, but before we get too many wounds, I think this might be an appropriate time to try and identify where in the protocols, the addendums, the diagrams and so forth, there may be any reference to these. So to make sure we are covering everything, we have 6 injuries seen in photograph G37, is that correct? That we need to cover?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yes.
All right, and we're going to save this last sharp force injury on the back of the right neck, as seen in G40. Was there any other injury that you've described in any detail that we should cover?
G51 at this time.
All right, and G51 is a more detailed depiction of the same injury that you've described as injury number 3, have you, in G37?
Yeah, I think that's correct.
I'm
sorry.
We take away the podium, Your Honor, and we lose a place to put things.
Yes.
All right. Is there anything, doctor, before we go to those, that you need to discuss with respect to these 6 injuries?
Not at this time.
Let me take this down then. Yes, counsel, doctor, to move. Have a moment, doctor.
Certainly. All right, Mr. Lynch is placing 0G.
And we're also going to use 6G, Your Honor,
I'm sorry,
and
do
4G.
you want to use the other easel?
Sure. Thank you. Good suggestion. And let me just get a marker too. All right, doctor. Let's start with what you described as injury number 1, the upper superficial incised wound. Is it described in Dr. Golden's autopsy report?
Yes, page 5, number 3 and 4. Page 5, item number 3 and 4 describes, item number 3 describes injury number 1.
All right. Where we've indicated, or the doctor has indicated that, let me outline that. I will write G37 INJ number 1 with a tic-tac-toe sign for the number designation.
Okay?
Is this, well, as long as we're on this page, I have a feeling, is number 4 referring to what is injury number 2?
No,
Oh,
number 4 refers to injury number 2.
All right. This number 4 on the same page is a reference to the second, the lower superficial
Yes.
incised injury. And I'll outline that in red, and on the side write G37 INJ number 2. Dr. Golden has expressed an opinion with respect to both of these that this is a non-fatal superficial incised wound. Do you agree with each of those opinions?
Yes. And
All right, how about before we go to injury number 3, was either injury 1 or 2 diagrammed in any fashion?
yes, in Form 22, Roman numeral 1.
Doctor, let me invite your attention over to this easel. Do you see anywhere on this 22, and number 1 refers to the Roman numeral 1 at the lower right-hand corner, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, where, if at all?
You can see it here in the left upper quadrant, front facial view of the diagram.
And what, if anything, has Dr. Golden written in that area?
Yes, superior border of larynx, and he has described the LM1. I can't read that one, but
Keep your voice up, please, doctor.
I can't read this one. It's just some initials here. It says IW, I think, incised wound, and you have the superior border of larynx here, and skin transverse wound,
And does all
and
of
it's
that,
also length is 3 inches.
that is as to,
Injury number 1.
and all of that refers to injury number 1?
No, there's also a depiction of injury number 2 below the injury number 1 here.
Let me, if I could, please, circle in red, but I want you to outline before I do any circling. Circle in red, if you would, please, where, if at all, Dr. Golden has depicted the location of injury number 1.
Right here.
Is it, there's a line above and a line below. Which line?
The line above.
The line above? Your Honor, I'll circle that in red. And out at the side right, G37 INJ number 1. And does he indicate injury number 2 by some kind of diagrammatic entry.
Here, below that.
And I'll circle that area that Dr. Lakshmanan has just pointed to and write G37 INJ number 2. And doctor, then the writing that refers to injury number 1 is which writing? If you'll just outline it with the pointer.
This one here.
I'll circle that, and I circled it with red, Your Honor, and I'll use a blue marker to make a line that goes joining the line already made for the injury number 1. Doctor, is there any other entry on this for injury number 2?
No.
Would you expect there to be an entry on this form for injury number 2 beside just drawing it?
I didn't see any measurement mentioned here.
Is there any other form that you've reviewed where it was in fact indicated, drawn in, measured, anything of that nature?
Not that I recall.
Keep your voice up if you would, please. You want me to flip?
Yes, 2 and 3, Roman numeral 2 and... He has just repeated the same injury here in 22-2 and go to number 3.
All right, just for the record, you were pointing to the upper left quadrant of 22, Roman numeral 2, and in this area where my finger is?
Yes, he has addressed the same injury diagram there.
And is that injury number 1 and injury number 2, or?
It reflects the same area as injury number 1.
Let me circle that. And I'll write G37 INJ number 1. All right, and let's flip then to number 3.
And that's it, only those 2 areas.
Okay? Doctor, in your opinion, is it a mistake of Dr. Golden's not to have made some kind of written entry somewhat similar in nature to that written in for injury number 1?
For injury number 2?
Yes.
Yes.
Does this affect this mistake on Dr. Golden's part? You consider it a mistake, I assume?
Yes.
Is this mistake of any significance to you on any of these big ticket questions?
No.
For all the same reasons?
Yes.
Now, doctor, is there any addendum entry with respect to either injury number 1 or injury number 2?
There is addendum entry on both of them.
This, Your Honor, is board 10G, which I'll put up here.
Page 1, Roman numeral 2, number 1 and number 2 reflect injury number 1 and 2. So let's start with injury number 1.
Is injury number 1 described in the paragraph or paragraphs under Roman numeral 2, item number 1?
Yes, he did an addendum reviewing the photographs, and he made the following amendment addition to the original report.
Do I include this, what appears to be a third paragraph under item number 1?
Yes, this includes for this one.
I'll outline that series of paragraphs and write G-37 INJ number 1. Doctor, I think we talked about this process with Nicole Brown Simpson, but I don't believe we've talked about it with Ronald Goldman. We have an addendum here, is that correct?
Yes,
And is this similar in nature to what we saw with Nicole Brown Simpson? That is, Dr. Golden prepared what might be described as a supplemental report to make changes to whatever may have been entered in the original report and to add information that was not contained in the original report?
that is correct. This happened, as I told you, when I told him about the brain contusion in Nicole. He indicated that he wanted to make an addendum report to reflect certain injuries on the photographs, which he wanted to address, and that's how the addendum report came about to be made. And I told you the procedure in our department, that when any error or is needed to be addressed, we issue an addendum because the original report stays as it is. We have nothing to hide, and that's what exactly took place here. This is number two. Item number two is,
Before we go to item number 2, I'm not quite done with the process yet. Let me flip to the last page. I don't think we have to flip it all the way. I'm afraid we do. There appears to be a date, at least a signed date. Let's start with that. July 1, 1994.
yes, sir.
There also appears to be a T and a 6-30-94 in the lower area below the typewritten entry of Dr. Golden's name and position. Do you see that?
Yes.
What does that reflect?
That is the date it was transcribed.
Now, Doctor, did you meet with Dr. Golden as you testified you met with him regarding Nicole Brown Simpson before that date regarding the need for an addendum in the Goldman case as well as the Brown Simpson case?
Yeah, he brought up the Goldman case's issue to me, and I said, do the addendum and let us look at it. And that's how I got involved in the addendum report of Mr. Goldman too.
Let me show you another board. Mr. Lynch, you give me the number of that? It's 9G. 9G, Your Honor. And I think this easel can take one more. Doctor, was there, in a similar fashion to the Nicole Brown Simpson addendum, a rough draft addendum prepared by Dr. Golden, reviewed by you, and following which we see the typewritten addendum that was on the earlier board?
Yes, as I told you earlier when I discussed Ms. Brown Simpson, my involvement was one as to the format of the addendum, because we have a certain format to follow, and you see my inscriptions here reflecting that, amended as originally stated, etc., etc. Wherever this is my handwriting, this is my handwriting.
Okay, before you run too far along, for the record, Your Honor, the witness was pointing to the handwriting that appears alongside the typewritten entry on page 1 of the addendum on this board, saying page 5, paragraph 3, for example, paragraph is crossed out and the word appears to be, I'll let you tell me what the word appears to be,
Which one?
Doctor. Above paragraph, and
Item number 3.
item number 3, and then the line continues. Is all of that writing yours, Doctor?
Not all of it. Portions of it are mine.
And
The
what is-
the item itself is not my handwriting, but this part is mine. So that is probably Golden's handwriting.
What is this intended to convey?
You see, when you make an addendum, and especially if you revise a portion of a report, the reader of the addendum report should perfectly understand what is being corrected. And if you read the paragraph above it, it says which paragraph in the original report is being corrected and what paragraph this addendum replaces.
Let me see if we can pull the original addendum draft to the right. Ask Mr. Lynch to pull the final addendum down for a second, just to flip the pages back over and see if we can compare maybe the best thing is just for me to what is it you're trying to convey with this change, Doctor?
Basically, if you see here, I've spelled it out, page 5, item 3, line 1 through 5, amended as originally stated to read as follows. That is, the original statements there is being amended. These 5 lines on page 5, item 3, line 1 through 5 is amended to read as follows, and that's what we have done there.
And in your opinion, it is important in order to give any reader of this, the addendum, and that, the original protocol, an accurate understanding of exactly what is taking place with this addendum?
Yes, and that's basically it. I said nothing to hide, and we want to show that the error was made, and we have addressed it.
Would it be accurate to say this is a procedural change that you wanted to see in the addendum, rather than one that goes to the substance of what the change itself is?
That's correct. I played a role in the procedure part of it.
while we have, I think Mr. Lynch can take the completed board down. But while we have the draft available, Doctor, there appears at the bottom of the 4th page of the draft addendum some substantial amount of handwriting, which there's a page 5, I'm sorry, it's not a page 5, but we have another page. In the original, you have the original draft addendum, do you not, Doctor?
Yes.
Is this what appears on a separate page actually written on the back of the last page of the draft addendum?
That is correct.
And whose handwriting is this, if you recognize it?
All of that is Golden's handwriting.
Doctor, does this handwriting on this page and what we started with at the bottom of the earlier page reflect concern to some degree that injury number 3, stab wound, complex stab wound to the left side of the neck that we
Yes.
saw in photograph? I may have just a moment. Let me just briefly bring this up. Concern injury number 3 seen in photograph G37?
Yes.
And does it also concern this injury that we had alluded to by you earlier along the left side under the left ear as seen in photograph G51?
Yes.
Is this aspect of the addendum with their handwritten entry by Dr. Golden, number 1, a substantive matter? Not just a procedural, let's get the wording right to make sure it's understood what's being exchanged in the way of the original with the addendum.
Yes, there's a change in the substance of the opinion of the report.
Did you participate in a discussion with Dr. Golden regarding the issue which is being discussed or addressed in this handwritten entry?
Yes, I did.
So in this particular instance, you would have involvement in the substantive aspect of the addendum, not just the procedural.
That is correct, because my opinion was also concurred by Dr. Golden when he re-evaluated the case.
All right, if we could take this down, let's go to injury number 3 and see where, if at all, it is in the protocol. Doctor, injury number 3, where in the protocol, if at all?
It's in G51. One second.
Keep your voice up, please, Doctor.
Yes, injury number 3 is described in page 3 and 4 of the protocol. And actually starts in page number 1 of the...
Keep your voice up,
It
Doctor.
starts in page number 1. We also have to discuss the injury number 2 of the lower incised wound in the addendum.
All right. Thank you for pointing that out. We'll get to it in just a second when we go back to the addendum.
Yes.
All right, so let's start with injury number 3. Sharp force injuries of neck, paragraph
Yes.
1.
Paragraph 1. Actually, it's not paragraph 1, it's the last paragraph on page 3.
Is a paragraph that has a number 1 next to it, right,
yes,
Doctor?
Yes.
All right, is this a correct annotation, G37, injury number 3?
Yes, and it's actually it's injury number 1 in G51.
Okay, we'll write G-37, INJ number 3, and G-51, INJ number 1, Doctor?
Yes.
Okay, and this continues on?
To page 4, up to almost the end of the page, opinion.
And where you stop, right to there, Doctor?
Yes.
I'll box this in red and write G-37, INJ number 3 and G-51, INJ number 1. Doctor, is there any diagram completed by Dr. Golden concerning this injury number 3 of G37?
Yeah, but this description also includes the injury behind the ear, which we have to add later.
All right, we'll get to that, but what we've outlined does concern injury number 3 of G37.
That's correct. And injury number 1 of 51.
All right.
Diagram is 22-1.
I think we're over here, Mr. Lynch. Where is injury number 3 of G37?
Right here in the right lower quadrant in the left side of the neck.
Is there an entry, a handwritten entry by Dr. Golden concerning that particular injury number 3?
This one here.
What has he written?
Diagonal incised wound, stab wound, mid-laryngeal area, length 3 inches, smooth edges, front to back. And then he has, since he described in the original report that this is a part of the same wound behind the left ear, he has given the total length as 6 inches. He has also described other aspects of this injury which we saw behind the ear, which we have not discussed yet.
Let's start, if we could, by just limiting whatever entry directly concerns the injury number 3 as you find it in the photograph.
Yeah. All this corresponds to that.
All right. Your Honor, where Dr. Lakshmanan had the pointer, Doctor, how far down do I go?
Up to this whole thing. And you can cut off this because this 6 inches reflects the whole depth. So we can include that also. It doesn't.
I'll leave that out if it doesn't. If it does not in fact concern the actual injury number 3. And I'll write G-37 INJ number 3. Now, Doctor, this other injury that you pointed out, and which is, just very briefly, the injury seen in G53, is that correct?
Yes.
Did Dr. Golden, in essence, characterize what you describe as 2 injuries as actually 1 injury?
Yes.
And that is in the original protocol?
Yes.
And in your opinion, was he wrong with that characterization?
Well, he did change his opinion on re-review of the photographs and analysis. So he had initially made an opinion which was different from an opinion which was made later.
Doctor, but my question was his opinion that this was 1 wound, these 2 areas that are seen in these 2 photographs, was that opinion wrong?
In my opinion, yes.
Was it therefore a mistake?
Yes.
Is that mistake of significance to you on any of these major issues that you've reviewed?
No.
I think I want to ask you why not when we get a better description and discussion of what you say is a separate injury and which you describe as injury number 1. You describe it as injury number 1 of G51. Is that correct?
This left side, no, that one is actually just kind of a G53.
You have to keep your voice up, Doctor.
Mr. Kelber, 10:30.
Yeah.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Described under G50. Never mind, G51. Just 1 second.
Doctor, again, please keep your voice up.
I'm trying to get the number here, G53.
I believe it's injury
G51.
And we'll get to that in a moment.
Yes.
Doctor, was there any other diagram entry by Dr. Golden regarding the injury that you describe as injury number 3, separate and apart from what you say is a mistake on his part to connect these two injuries shown in the diagrammatic outline of the left side of the human head in our Roman numeral 1 of Form 22?
He had not described the linear cut abrasion which was seen in the lower margin of this wound.
I'm sorry, he does not describe in the diagram some aspect that you see of this injury number 3?
Yes.
And that aspect is?
The linear abrasion underneath the wound.
If you could show us what is it, and on photograph G51, you've taken the pointer and traced a somewhat horizontal line along the bottom portion of that particular injury.
Yes.
Is that a mistake not to have made some reference to it in this diagram?
Yes, it is.
Is it discussed, however, in the protocol?
No.
So that would be a mistake as well, not to have done some entry there?
Yes.
And again, have you reviewed the significance of those mistakes as to whether or not they affect your ability to answer any of the major questions?
Yes, I have.
Is there any significance with respect to those mistakes?
No.
Any other diagram that has an entry for injury number 3?
No.
Is there anything in the addendum regarding injury number 3?
Yes. It's page.
Again, Your Honor, Board 10G. Doctor, the pages?
Page 2, number 4. And
Mr. Lynch, I think you're going to have to move away just a bit.
the same thing, page 3, item 1, lines 1 through 5, and page 4, line 1 through 17 of the original report was amended with this paragraph which starts as item 4 on page 2 of the addendum and continues into page 3.
Before we flip the page, let me just outline on page 2. This is G-37, INJ number 3, and also G51.
1, 2, and 3.
And G-51, INJ number 1. All right, if we can flip the page to get to page 3 of the addendum.
Yes. And it goes up to here, and also item 5 of page 3 is an amendment to the opinion.
Let's stop before we get to that aspect and outline this area that I'm outlining now, along with the area I just outlined, is the change in description of the injury. Is that accurate, Doctor?
Change in description injury, and also this paragraph includes the injury number 2, which we briefly alluded to in G51,
All right.
which is behind the ear.
Let me write G-37, INJ number 3, and G51, INJ number 1.
And 2.
And I'll write in blue and INJ number 2. Then you say, Doctor, that this paragraph 5 of page 3, at least with the number 5, that entry concerns a change in opinion from the opinion expressed. If you can look on page 4 of the protocol, where you're pointing right now, is that basically the opinion that is being changed?
Yes.
Let me outline this first. G-37, INJ number 3, and G-51, INJ number 1. And does this also affect a change to injury number 2 of G51?
Yes, it does.
All right.
Because he has now indicated that though both the wounds share a common path of injury, they appear to be separate wounds.
And I've added for the record, Your Honor, in blue, and INJ number 2. Doctor, in lay terms, summarize, if you could, for us what this change in a significant number of lines is all about.
Basically reflects the change in the opinion between being one wound and separating the wound behind the ear and the left neck as two separate wounds. And also the other change in the addendum is there's a better definition and description of the injury behind the left ear.
Doctor, do you believe...
And this was based on the photographic review.
And Dr. Golden's photographic review was of photographs much like the photographs that are on the exhibit 358?
Yes.
And photographs, 358 is the board that I've been pulling out occasionally. And those are similar to the photographs you reviewed initially, is that correct?
Yes, but I also, as I mentioned earlier, I did measurements on 1:1 photographs, life-size photographs on all these injuries too.
In your opinion, doctor, does the addendum concerning injury number 3 of G37 or injury number 1 of G51 accurately describe the injury?
Yes, it does.
Does the addendum opinion accurately reflect your opinion as to that injury?
It reflects my opinion now.
I'm sorry.
It reflects my opinion.
And would the same apply with respect to the description of what we're going to see as injury number 2 of G51?
Yes.
And as to your opinion concerning injury number 2 of G51?
Yes, except that in my 1:1 photograph, the measurement was slightly longer, but given the limitation of the process, there's no significant difference in measurements.
I think, Your Honor, this is an appropriate time.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our first short break for the morning. Please remember all my admonitions to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves. Form any opinions about the case. Allow anybody to communicate with you or conduct any deliberations until the matter has been submitted to you. And we'll take a 15-minute recess. Please. Jury panel. Dr. Laxmanan is again on the witness stand undergoing direct examination by Mr. Kellberg. And Mr. Kellberg, you may continue with your direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Doctor, you'll step down again with the court's permission. Let's continue on, if we could, with the review of the injuries 1 through 6. While we have the protocol up, and before we go to injury number 4, actually we also have to go back and pick up injury number 2 in the addendum. Why don't we do that first? I think you mentioned that there was an entry for it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, again, this is Board 10G. Doctor, is this page 1 of the addendum? What you indicate contains some indication of a change regarding injury number 2?
No, it's it starts there and go to the page number 2.
All right, before we go to page number 2, this is the start of the change?
Yes.
And so again, this is now G-37, INJ number 2, the lower superficial incised wound, is that correct?
Yes.
Where does it continue, doctor?
It continues as paragraph 1 and ends in paragraph 2.
Now, in that area, also in blue, on page 2 of the addendum, and write G-37, INJ
Yes.
Number 2.
Yes.
Doctor, in your opinion, does the addendum with respect to both injuries numbers 1 and 2 accurately reflect the description of those 2 superficial incised wounds?
Yes.
And if there is any opinion expressed with respect to those injuries in the addendum, are any such opinions accurate in your opinion?
Yes.
Doctor, again, to go back to the protocol just briefly. Yesterday, I believe it was, we talked about a concept, aspiration of blood.
Yes.
And as I recall your testimony, you talked about blood being taken through the trachea and getting into the lungs. Is that correct?
Yes.
Keep your voice up,
Yes.
please. Doctor, from the sharp force injury that you've described as injury number 3 of G37, would you normally expect there to be evidence of aspirated blood in Mr. Goldman?
No, because this injury was only to the vein.
If you'll keep your voice up, please.
It was only an injury to the vein.
And how is it that an injury to the vein rather than an injury to the carotid artery will not result in aspiration of blood?
See, in the other person, Ms. Nicole Brown Simpson, the injury also involved the thyrohyoid area, which is between the voice box and the hyoid bone. So that was transected. So the question of aspiration comes. So for aspiration of blood to occur in the respiratory tract, it has to be an injury which causes bleeding and allows the bleeding to go into those areas. And also for aspiration, generally you expect person to be unconscious, because if usually aspiration occurs more when you are not conscious,
Why is that?
because you lose your reflex, which allows your epiglottis. Remember I talked about epiglottis, that will close the air passage so that you don't aspirate.
So normally there's an automatic reflex that you have in your body to keep you from swallowing things down the wrong pipe?
Yes, that's why you should not talk and eat, and you'll aspirate if you talk and eat.
Doctor, did Dr. Golden make an examination of the area of the trachea and the lungs?
Yes, he did. It's in the protocol, I think page... there it is. Starts there.
We're on to page 14. This is board 0G, Your Honor.
Page 14.
Page 14, yes. Where does it start, Doctor?
It starts respiratory tract, throat structures, and starts with oral cavity, no injuries to lips, teeth, or gum, no obstruction of the airway.
And it continues
Next page.
and saying,
Injury to the left. Left internal jugular vein has been previously described. Mucosa of the epiglottis, glottis.
I think the court reporter and
Yes.
everyone else will be thankful if we don't have to have any of the extra terms. How far does this go down?
This goes down all the way up to paragraph 4 on page 15.
Now, Doctor, from what is described here by Dr. Golden, in your opinion, is that what you would expect to find given the nature of the sharp force injuries to the neck that you have seen in the photographs of Mr. Goldman's body?
Yes, but Mr. Goldman also suffered 2 stab wounds to the chest, which caused injury to the lung, on the right lung, which is reflected in paragraph 4 of page 15.
We'll get back to that when we see the photographs regarding the lung sharp force injuries. But as to simply the sharp force injuries to the neck, is there anything inconsistent with this description from what you would expect to have seen?
None.
Also, Doctor, did you examine tissue samples that were preserved at autopsy from the Goldman case by Dr. Golden?
Yes, I did.
Did that include sample of lung tissue
Yes, I did.
and supporting structures?
Yes.
Did you find anything in your examination? Is that a gross examination of tissue that is a naked eye examination?
I did both a naked eye examination of the tissue when I saw the tissues actually twice, once with defense pathologist Dr. Barden, who's here, and again with Dr. Barden when he came to cut microscopic sections in May of this year.
In May of 1995?
Yes. And I also looked at the microscopic sections on this case with Dr. Golden.
Doctor, did you find anything that, in your opinion, was out of whack, if you will, from what you would have expected to see given the nature of the sharp force injuries to the neck?
No, the lungs did show some hemorrhage in the air spaces, but that is related to the stab wound to the lung.
That we're going to talk about later.
Yes.
All right. So, Your Honor, for this area, I'm going to outline on page 15 in blue the 3 full paragraphs and the continuation of the paragraph from the previous page, and write no aspirated blood. Is that accurate, doctor? Is there
No aspirated blood from the left neck wound, but there is some blood in the lung from the injury from the stab wound itself.
from left neck wound? And I'm sorry, I didn't catch, what is there? There is some blood.
There is hemorrhage in the lung tissue from the stab wound to the lung.
All right, but that's a different matter.
Yes.
Okay. And let me just have that outline. Added for the page previous, and I'll just write no ASP, BL, well, I'll fill out blood from neck wound. And that's page 14 of the protocol.
Thank you.
Now, doctor, injury number 4 of G37, and can you refresh our memory with respect to which injury that is?
Injury number 4 was that superficial cut we saw above the injury number 1 in the front of the neck.
Let me just briefly put this up again. And ask you if you would please. I'm sorry, the superficial cut above. All right. And what were...
And that's injury number 4.
All right.
And we also have injury number 5, which is small abrasion below the injury number 2 to the front of the neck, which we have discussed.
And then injury number 6 is...
The superficial stab wound to the right collarbone area, shoulder area.
All right, let's take care of 4, 5, and 6 then. As I recall yesterday, did you testify that 4 and 5 were not addressed in the original autopsy protocol?
That is correct.
And further, they were not diagrammed in any of the forms available?
That is correct.
And they are not addressed in any way in this addendum that's on one of the easels. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All of which were mistakes, and I believe you described them as such.
Yes.
And as I also recall, you said there was no significance to any of them in your opinion.
As far as the big picture item goes.
Now, how about this item number 6? Is it described in the original protocol?
Yes, page 10, number 6.
And you say item number 6?
Item number 6, page 10, yes.
All right. And doctor, this is the entire, it appears that it continues over.
To page 11 also.
Let's start with this, and we'll just outline in blue. This is G37, INJ number 6. Is that correct, doctor?
Yes.
Actually, before we go further, does Dr. Golden anywhere describe the depth of penetration of that sharp force injury?
No, he just says skin and subcutaneous tissue.
The subcutaneous tissue is, in general, how deep below the top layer of the skin that we can look at with our eyes?
In an average person who's not on the obese side, it will be less than half an inch or quarter inch, depending on where the location of the subcutaneous tissue is, because you may have a thicker subcutaneous tissue in the abdomen compared to a subcutaneous tissue on the skin of the forehead. So it varies, but in this area, quarter inch would be a rough estimate in a muscular young person.
Doctor, if you are attempting as a forensic pathologist to provide a completely accurate description of a sharp force injury as a stab wound versus an incised wound, must one know what the depth of penetration is?
Yes.
And given Dr. Golden's, would you describe it as a failure to describe the depth of penetration of injury number 6?
Yes.
Given that failure, can you say whether that is a stab wound or an incised wound?
No, but he does describe it's a very superficial wound.
And as a superficial wound, and first of all, does it appear from the photograph to be a superficial wound?
Well, it's a cut on the skin surface, and you cannot say how deep it is till you examine it, and he has examined it, and he says it's skin and soft tissue, superficial.
Does it make any difference from your perspective in evaluating any of the big issues that you've considered, whether or not it's an incise or a stab wound, depending on whether the depth is greater than the length on the surface of the wound, or the depth is greater than the length on the surface of the skin?
It won't affect my opinion on the big picture questions which we have already discussed.
But if we flip and just find where the description of this ends.
It ends approximately, actually it could include up to here. Up to here.
So basically down to where
Paragraph 3 from the top on page 11.
I'll outline that. Area on page 11, write G-37, INJ number 6. Doctor, in your opinion, is injury number 6 non-fatal?
That's correct.
Is injury number 6 one that was received before death?
Yes.
On what basis are you able to say that?
The appearance and also his description of some amount of subcutaneous hemorrhage.
How does some appearance, you're referring to this line, the last 2 lines of the continued paragraph from page 10, there is a small amount of fresh cutaneous hemorrhage?
Yes.
What significance is that to you on
That
this
means
issue?
Mr. Goldman had blood pressure to cause bleeding at the time the wound was inflicted.
And obviously from that, his heart had to be beating?
That's correct.
Doctor, the direction that Dr. Golden has provided, the first full paragraph of page 11, which is one sentence, no direction can be evident except for front to back in as much as it is superficial. What does front to back mean as you interpret that description?
As I told you, we describe all our directions in the body being in the anatomical position, and this wound is situated in the right collarbone area, so it's going in a front to back direction, from the front to the back.
Doctor, are you able to determine from that description the relative positions between Mr. Goldman and his assailant at the time injury number 6 was received?
No.
Why not?
Because it's such a superficial wound, it could have been inflicted when the assailant was behind Mr. Goldman with a knife, striking him on the right shoulder, or it could be when he was in the front or on his side. It's a very superficial wound, and you can't make any determination on the position of the assailant in relationship to the victim in this particular wound.
Doctor, was any diagram entry made by Dr. Golden for injury number 6?
Yes, 20, number 1.
Mr. Lynch, is 20 over there by
27.
I think we have it here. Actually, why don't we put it up here? I think it might be safer if we can work with just the 2 easels that are presently up. Doctor, showing you, this is board, by the way, I'm sorry, Your Honor, 2G from the collection 357. I think.
I don't think so.
I think our subpart 356 A through R, as I recall, are the autopsy materials. I think, yes, 356 A through R are the paper documents. So 357, I think, is our collective
All right.
set of blow-ups. Doctor, Form 20, item number 1. You see an entry here for injury
Yes.
number 6.
You see the entry for the wound on the diagram in the right collarbone area, and the entire description applies to the wound. It says superficial,
Slow down, doctor.
superficial incise stab wound, vertically oriented, right clavicle, half an inch, deep is only up to sub-Q, and is given a configuration of the wound here in a diagrammatic fashion as an inscription next to the diagram.
Sub-Q means,
Subcutaneous tissue.
doctor, you have to keep your voice.
Subcutaneous tissue, yes.
Where Dr. Lakshmanan has been referring with respect to the diagram of the wound itself and the description, I've circled the area in blue. I'll write G-37 on Form 1 of the figure 20 and INJ number 6. Doctor, is there any aspect of the addendum which addresses injury number 6?
No.
Is there anything further with respect to the 6 injuries on photograph G37 that you wish to bring to our attention?
No.
All right, we can take this down. Doctor, let's go back to photographs G51 and G53 to have you discuss in some detail, if you will, please, this injury that you say you have arbitrarily identified as injury number 2 of G51. Is that correct?
Yes.
And this injury that we see in G51 is the same injury that is seen in G53. Is that correct?
Yes.
What is that injury in the first place, doctor?
It's an injury which shares a common path with injury number 1 of G51, but it's a separate injury. You have a 7/8 inch stab wound to the area behind the left ear, and then you have an open area of skin which measures about 2 3/8 of an inch in the 1:1 photograph. So, and this particular wound also cuts 2-inch pre-existing cut in the skin at the same time, and this would be a complex sharp force injury by a stab wound which took place behind the left ear, and the complexity was created by the head of the victim moving away from the knife or the knife being pulled away, but I would favor the former than the latter.
The former being?
The head being pulled away at the time this plunge took place, which would cause this ripping of the skin by the knife as it's being withdrawn from the body.
Doctor, why do you favor that alternative?
Because a person who stabs would not pull out the knife in the manner this happened. They would pull it out the same way they put it in.
For the record, Your Honor, Dr. Lakshmanan first began with a more or less side-to-side motion with his right hand appearing to hold a knife, and said that would not be what he would expect. He would expect that the knife to be withdrawn in the same manner in which it had been used to inflict the injury to begin with, and that was then changed with his right hand to an up and down motion with his clenched fist appearing to be holding a knife that is pointed in a downward direction.
In an overhand manner.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And this also supports the situation which I've always described, that these are dynamic processes. the movement of the weapon and the movement of the victim. So you'll never have, you'll always have this complex issues when you deal with sharp force injury. This only supports that statement which I made earlier. So this is due to that. And as I told you, there is also a 2-inch cut which I've labeled as injury number 3, and that was existing before this wound took place. And to explain further, this wound in its depth communicates with sharp force injury 1, which is to the left neck, which we discussed. So this could have also injured the left internal jugular vein, same as stab wound number 3, because they share a common path, but they are separate wounds in my opinion. And
But before you get too much further ahead, Doctor, you've given us a lot of information, and I want to ask some clarifying questions. Just to start with, when you're saying injury number 1 of photograph G51, are we talking about the same injury that we had earlier described by you as injury number 3 of G37?
yes,
Number 2, you talked about these 2 injuries communicating.
yes,
Is that a term of art that you as a forensic pathologist use?
yes.
What does it mean?
It would mean that the internal injury track is shared by these 2 wounds, the one behind the left ear and the one in the left neck.
Now, Doctor, from your review of all of the material, have you seen a description by Dr. Golden as to the path of the wound that is marked as either number 1 of G51 or number 3 of G37?
Yes, I have. The wound goes through the skin, soft tissue. There's a muscle in this left neck called the sternocleidomastoid, sternocleidomastoid, and that muscle was incised, and then this particular wound also transected the internal jugular vein on the left side.
Is there a direction that is attributable to this injury?
It went left to right in an upward direction there.
Can you use me again as an example and perhaps the ruler to represent a knife to indicate the direction of that particular injury, injury number 1 of G51?
It's just an approximate left to right upward direction.
And for the record, Your Honor, Dr. Lakshmanan is holding the ruler where the end in contact with my left side of the neck is slightly elevated from the opposite end of the ruler, therefore pointing in an upward direction, and I can't quite see the left to right aspect.
And I have to again re-emphasize that this was a complex wound,
Meaning?
that more than one penetration and twisting could have taken place when this wound was created. So I'm just giving one possible direction which shares this common path with this injury.
And that was part of the demonstration that we did earlier this morning?
Yes.
Now, Doctor, is there a description of the pathway of what you have described as injury number 2 of G51?
Basically, as I told you, there's a skin cut because of either the, most likely from the victim moving away from pulling himself away from the weapon when that injury was created. The path on the internal part of the body is shared by this same wound. So you cannot tell which part of the path is due to this and which part of the path is due to this.
Doctor, is that somewhat similar to what we were talking about earlier this morning with respect to G55 or G40 with respect to the sharp force injury that's in the back of the neck area and that superficial incised wound? You can't tell where one ends and the other begins?
It is very similar. Only thing here we are discussing the external overlapping which can occur. Here we are discussing internal structure overlapping which can occur.
Doctor, from your review of the material, do you have an opinion as to whether the complex wound that you've described as injury number 2 was a fatal wound?
If it hit the internal jugular vein like the sharp force injury to the left neck which I discussed, then that also would be a potentially fatal wound.
Would it, assuming it did not hit the jugular vein on the left side, would it create a life-threatening situation nevertheless?
It would cause significant bleeding, but it would not be a fatal wound like a wound which would strike the internal jugular vein.
Is there any way you would have expected at autopsy that, given the nature of these two wounds, injury number 1, injury number 2, that you would have been able to determine whether in fact injury number 2 resulted in injury to the jugular vein along with injury to the jugular vein caused by the first stab wound?
It'll be very,
It calls for speculation.
You may answer the question, Doctor.
it'll be very difficult.
Why?
Because of the extensive bleeding there, and I told you the venous channels are more fragile structures, and it'll be difficult to evaluate it, especially if you have a massive injury to the venous channel like Dr. Golden has described it being transected.
When you say a venous channel, what are you talking about, a vein?
Yes.
And when you say fragile, what do you mean?
The wall of the vein is thin compared to the artery, and when you have a transection which is taking place, is a portion of the vein wall would be torn.
Would be, I'm sorry.
Torn. It'll be torn and cut.
Could you spell the word?
T-O-R-N, torn.
Oh, torn, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Okay. Doctor, can you, again, using me as Mr. Goldman and yourself as the perpetrator, demonstrate what you were talking about with the turning, the dynamics that creates what you believe is the favored alternative for this particular injury number 2?
Yeah, and also, I'd also like to describe at this point one more injury in the ear which may be related to this wound.
Would you prefer to wait on the demonstration until you describe that injury? Is it going to be more helpful that you describe
Or
this?
we can do the demonstration and then we could discuss that injury, because we'll do the
We'll
demonstration.
do the demonstration. And since it's my left side, Your Honor, I'm going to turn so that my left side is visible to the jurors.
Like this, and you pull yourself away with the skin ripping open because the knife penetrates, and this ruler unfortunately is on the outside. So imagine the ruler to be inside the skin and the head moves. The sharp part of the knife will rip the skin as you see it here in this photograph. As the knife is pulled out because of the movement of the head.
Doctor, you're going to have to position yourself again, and we'll very slowly go through this so I can describe it for the record. For the record, Your Honor, Dr. Lakshmanan is face-to-face with me. He's holding the ruler in a manner that it's in his right hand. He's got the lower end of the ruler. I can feel it in contact with my ear, Your Honor, but I cannot see exactly where it's placed. Perhaps the court could help me out on that part.
All right, slightly below the ear on the left neck. Doctor's holding it in what appears to be an overhand stabbing.
Now, Doctor, would you slowly go through the process that you are talking about, this dynamic process that you...
Since the knife would have penetrated, because the stabbing has taken place, but since it's a dynamic process, the victim would have pulled the head, and at that point the sharp edge of the knife would rip the skin out, and that's how this wound would have been created.
And for the record, Your Honor, Dr. Lakshmanan, if you'll get back in position, Doctor, please. Dr. Lakshmanan removed the ruler from the area where it was, pulling it with his right hand back towards his head. At the same time, I believe he's asked me to pull my head away from him. Is that correct, Doctor?
Yes.
And I have done so in a diagonal direction to the rear to reflect an effort by the victim to avoid that particular stab wound?
Yes.
Thank you.
Doctor, in your opinion, could a single-edged knife with an approximate 6-inch blade have caused sharp force injury, this complex stab wound that's number 1 of G51 and number 3 of G37, as well as what you said is injury number 2, this complex sharp force injury of G51?
It could have.
And for all of the sharp force injuries, including the little nicks and so forth that you've described to this point, could it have caused all of those as well?
It could have.
Are you able to determine I think you testified yesterday, but correct me if I'm mistaken. I believe you testified that sharp force injury number 3 of 37, 1 of 51, could have been caused by a single-edged knife, but it is also possible it could have been caused by a double-edged knife because you cannot distinguish due to the appearance of the wound. Is that accurate?
Yes, but I said I favor the single edge because of the tissue bridging you see here.
On the right edge of the injury as you were looking at it in the photograph.
And also because of the abrasion in the margin, but I also stated that you cannot absolutely exclude a double edge because the double edge knife tip, if it is moved on the skin perpendicular to the sharp edges, it can cause an abrasion.
And this is simply one of the limitations in forensic pathology, correct?
That is correct.
And you do not take into account, do you, for your interpretation of whether this is only from a single-edged knife or possibly from a double-edged knife as well, any what I'll describe as circumstantial evidence that may be presented in a trial that is not of a medical nature?
Objection.
You may answer the question, if you recall. I think from that smile, Doctor, I have a feeling I better
didn't
try
recall
again.
the question was
A little long and unclear.
if you can break it down.
I'll do my best. Doctor, when you are assessing whether a single-edged knife and only a single-edged knife could have created a particular sharp force injury, are you limiting yourself to the medicine that is in front of you?
Absolutely.
Do you take into account at all circumstantial evidence that might point to who that person is that actually did this? Do you take that into account?
No.
Or take into account, for example, if there were evidence that the person who was suspected of doing this had a particular kind of knife that you should favor, that is the kind of knife rather than another kind because there's not that kind of knife possessed by the person suspected?
Objection, Jay.
You may answer that.
No, I already emphasized, I'm only giving you medical facts. I'm giving you my opinion on the medical facts from my training, experience, and education, and my knowledge on the subject, and my experience on doing a number of these kind of cases. It's nothing to do with circumstances. What we see here, I'm looking at the wound and giving you an opinion based on the wound characteristics. And as I told you, we did do some experiments in our department with Mr. Steve Dowell, and I'm giving you our experience with these type of injuries. Nothing to do with circumstances. It's pure medical opinion and nothing more than that.
Next question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Doctor, with respect to injury number 2 of G51, do you have an opinion as to whether that sharp force injury could only have been caused by a single-edged knife, or is it similar to the other injury, could also have been caused by a double-edged knife?
I think it could have been caused by a single-edged knife, and I cannot exclude a double-edged knife.
Why can you not exclude a double-edged knife
Because
as,
the wound,
as a possibility?
because of the complex nature of the wound, and for the same reasons I discussed in my initial presentation of sharp force injury, you cannot exclude it.
Is this injury number 2 an example again of that third type of wound appearance that we saw on the chart?
No, this would be more akin to a penetrating slash incise wound, because you have a large wound, so it's very difficult to pinpoint class characteristics of a weapon from a wound portion of the skin behind the left ear. That left ear can also be cut while this wound is taking place.
For the record, Your Honor, basically Dr. Lakshman,
Sorry.
no problem. He put himself back in the same position he was in for the original demonstration concerning that injury number 2, and then was pointing out in relationship to where the ruler was being held, where the ear was in contact with what would be the sharp edge of the knife.
Yes.
Doctor, from looking at what you've described as injury number 4, this cut, are you able to determine that it was in fact inflicted before death?
Yes,
How can you make that determination?
because of the appearance.
And would it be accurate to assume that it is not a fatal sharp force injury?
That is correct.
does it have any significance to you other than as a factor in assessing a likely circumstance for injury number 2 to have been inflicted? Does it have any significance beyond that to you on any of the issues you've considered?
No.
Is that injury number 4 described by Dr. Golden in his original protocol?
Yes, he has.
Has he diagrammed that particular injury anywhere?
Yes, he has.
Is it addressed anywhere in the addendum?
No,
In your judgment, was there any reason that it needed to be addressed in the addendum?
it need not be addressed in the addendum because it is accurately described and diagrammed.
Now, again, before we go to the protocols and so forth, you also were mentioning something about how injury number 2 is laying over another injury, which, as looking at photograph G51 and perhaps even better in G53, there appear to be 2 lines, for lack of a better lay term, which are on either side of the scraping area of skin that is a part of injury number 2. You did testify regarding those earlier?
Yes, I said that there was a cut which was pre-existent to this sharp force injury behind the left ear.
Doctor, how are you able to say that this was a cut that was pre-existent to injury number 2?
Because if you see the cut, you can see that this other cut this pre-existing cut, and you can see the depth of the cut in the margin of this wound.
And is that something that you're trained to look for
Yes,
in an effort to figure out whether one wound came first or second?
yes.
Why is it, doctor, in looking at it, that it appears, I'll withdraw the question, is it accurate to say that this part, which is the part about midway down from where you indicated this sharp force injury begins and where you indicated it ends, and is on the right side as one looks at the injury in the photograph G53, and this other side, this smaller line, which is on the lower portion of the injury, but on the left side as you look at it, how can you say that was one injury that was pre-existing? You've talked about why it's pre-existent. How can you tell it was a single injury?
Because of the complex nature of the sharp force injury behind the left ear and the ripping of the skin, the cut edges have been displaced. If you put the edges back together, you will see that they are one continuous cut. And there is a crime scene, crime scene photograph, or one of the autopsy photographs which I have reviewed, which shows it in line.
And doctor, is again, this the kind of thing that you're trained to look for and to do, that is try and put these wounds together to see whether these arise as a single wound or in fact are independent wounds?
That is correct.
Now, is this wound given a designation by you in one of the photographs?
I gave it as injury number 3 in G51.
So we're back down here, and again, it's not as clear there, but you have included both sides as the injury number 3?
Yes.
From what you've already told us, is it your opinion that that occurred before death?
Yes.
In your opinion, is that a non-fatal sharp force injury?
Yes.
Can you tell us anything, doctor, from its appearance or any of the other information you've gained knowledge of from your review, the manner in which that injury was inflicted? That's
the kind of injury which is a superficial cut. It could be from when the knife was being wielded, and there's partial contact of the skin surface to the tip of the knife. So wherein you only get a superficial cut, and it doesn't have any specific pattern to it like we saw on the 2 superficial wounds in the front of the neck, where I was able to opine that there was some control over the victim at that point. But here it's a random superficial cut, which could be just from wielding and portion of the knife striking the victim during the dynamic process of the altercation.
Doctor, did Dr. Golden address in any fashion this injury number 3 in his original protocol?
Yes, he did.
Did he diagram that injury number 3 anywhere in any of the available forms?
He did.
Is it addressed anywhere in any of the addenda?
No.
in your judgment, was there any need to do so?
No,
Why not?
he has accurately described it.
We've covered, let's see, injury number 1, injury number 2, injury number 3, and injury number 4 of G51. Is that correct, Doctor?
Yes.
Why don't we, in the time that we have, try and get those 4 taken care of with the protocols, the addendums, the diagrams. If that's okay with you.
Fine.
Let's start with, we've taken care of injury number 1, I believe, have we not, Doctor?
Yes, we have.
And we've, to some degree, talked about injury number 2, especially in relationship to the addendum. But where, to make sure we have covered it in an entry on the protocol, is there the reference by Dr. Golden to injury number 2, this complex wound you've described under the left ear of Mr. Goldman?
It's described better in the addendum than in the main report, because in the main original autopsy report, as you recall, Dr. Golden described that particular wound behind the left ear as part of the wound which was in the left neck.
Doctor, before we get to the actual entry, is there any way that you can understand medically how that determination could have been made by Dr. Golden?
Well, he felt that the wound to the left neck came out in the behind the left ear, and also caused a cut in the left ear itself. And he felt that together they could be 6 inches in length, and that was his original opinion in the original protocol.
Before you go further, let's see if we can identify where in the original protocol he makes that kind of entry.
He says that the direction of the sharp force injury is upward, front to back, and the total length of the wound is approximately 4 inches.
Now, is that referring to the injury number 1 of G37?
Yes. And
Now, if you'll continue...
actually, we should start here.
All right, you want to back up to...
Yes, paragraph number 1, page 4. It says here that the wound path went through the skin, subcutaneous tissue, sternocleidomastoid muscle, transection of the left internal jugular vein with hemorrhage, dark red purple, and the direction is upward, slightly front to back, 4 inches approximately, and it exits in the post-auricular area.
All right, is that where we're going to find the beginning of what you interpret as Dr. Golden's description of this injury number 2?
Yes.
Let me start there with a blue line over that area, and I'll let you continue.
And he says that gaping stab incised wound which has undulating wavy borders but is not serrated. Intersecting the wound at right angle is a superior inferior 2-inch interrupted superficial incised wound involving only the skin.
Is that injury number 3?
Yes.
Let me, in blue, outline that area, and I'll write G-51 INJ number 3. All right?
And then it continues here, and he says that the length of the wound path to this one is 4 inches. He repeats that.
Okay, before you go further, let me just finish outlining the first part of the description. And I'm going to put a red over the original blue for that very small area in the first paragraph of page 4. And I'll write out at the side G-51 INJ number 2. Is that correct? That is to reflect what Dr. Golden is in fact referring to that you believe is injury number 2.
Yes.
All right, now where does he pick up with injury number 2?
He doesn't address it further here except to say that he describes injury number 4, which is a cut to the left ear, 3/4 inch cut.
Okay. Point out what portion deals with injury number 4.
Line 4, paragraph 3, page 4. However, there is a 3/4 inch cut, 3/4 inch in length, linear cutting incise wound to the top or superior aspect of the pinna of the left ear.
And I'll outline that area in red. And that is G-51 INJ number 4.
And then he says that a straight metallic probe placed through the major sharp force injury shows that the injury to the superior part of the ear can be aligned with the metallic rod, suggesting that the 3 injuries are related.
Let me stop you, doctor. In lay terms, what has Dr. Golden described?
He says that he put a metal rod through the wound behind the ear and this wound in the left neck. They all share a common path, which can also be related to the cut in the left ear.
When you say they share a common path, in lay terms, they're in a straight line?
Yes. And he says the rod suggests that.
The metallic rod that he's putting through?
Yes.
All right. If you'll continue on.
And he says that path is 6 inches up to here, this point. That length of that path is 6 inches.
So from what Dr. Golden has indicated on this particular entry, he has expressed a view that what you start out with as injury number 1 of G51, what you have as injury number 2 of G51, and what you have to the ear as injury number 4 of G51 were all the product of the knife going in where injury number 1 begins, the knife going through and exiting the ear where you believe the beginning of injury number 2 actually exists, exiting the head and cutting the ear in the area of the pinna as indicated from the photograph and Dr. Golden's description. Is that what, in essence, Dr. Golden has said?
In the original report, yes.
Doctor, other than they're all in a straight line, medically, does any of that make sense?
To me, my opinion was different.
That wasn't my question, Doctor.
It didn't make sense to me.
Medically, to you, does that make sense?
No, it didn't make sense to me.
Would you describe Dr. Golden's interpretation of what those 3 injuries reflect as a mistake?
Yes.
In your opinion, is that mistake one of significance as to cause of death?
No.
Why not?
Because the cause of death would still be the same because the jugular vein is injured and the cause of death is due to the bleeding of the vessel.
As to the manner of death?
No.
Why not?
Because this is a homicide, it is a death in the hands of another. That really doesn't change with the interpretation of this wound.
Whether a single-edged knife, 6-inch blade approximately, caused all injuries 1, 2, and 4?
It does not change my opinion on that either.
Why not?
Because as I told you earlier, these wounds are complex. You cannot, it could be a single-edged knife and you cannot exclude a double-edged knife.
With respect to the amount of bleeding one would expect?
It doesn't change that either because the jugular vein, as I told you, is a big vessel in the left neck and it will cause bleeding and it won't change anything as to the effect of the bleeding from the description of these wounds.
With respect to how long Mr. Goldman lived from the time those 3 injuries were inflicted?
Again, that won't have an effect because of the physiological process of bleeding and shock is totally different from the interpretation of the injuries, which is what has been wrong here.
From any other big-ticket issue that you have reviewed?
No other effect.
Including whether one person is responsible for killing Mr. Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson?
That's correct.
Why not?
Because one person could have done the same injuries as I see it, and the that doesn't, that will not be reflected by the appearance of these injuries.
Let's do the addendum in the short time that we have left, and we can pick up the diagram later if necessary. Doctor, you've already told us a bit about how the addendum
Starts here. It's page 4, sorry, page 2, item 4.
Page 2, item 4. So where we have this outlined in red, should we also add now and G51 injury number 2?
Yes.
You're looking at me like I
Yeah.
didn't quite catch that one.
Yeah, actually, injury number 2 is better described on page 3.
All right. The part that we've already outlined. Is this a change with respect to injury number 2?
No, second paragraph, page 3.
And you, with the word dissection discloses that this wound path communicates or connects along the tissue plane with a sharp forced wound of the left posterior auricular region, which is gaping and has undulating or wavy borders, particularly on the anterior aspect. After approximation of the edges, it measures 2 inches in length, and the inferior end is tapered or pointed. The superior end has a semicircular configuration measuring 7/8 by 1/2 inch. The 2 sharp force injuries communicate along the tissue planes and are separated by a length of 4 inches. That's the discussion of injury number 2?
Yes.
Doctor, in your opinion, does that accurately reflect the true circumstances of injury number 2?
Yes.
This next entry deals with injury number 3?
Yes.
So this is, I'll mark out in blue, this is G-51 INJ number 3.
Yes.
And then back to this item 5, the opinion that had originally been expressed by Dr. Golden, in essence, that this was 1 sharp force injury, 1, 2, and 4, 1 sharp force injury, is now changed to read as it is in item 5.
Yes.
These sharp force injuries of the neck are fatal as they are associated with transection of the left internal jugular vein with hemorrhage. Though they share common areas of injury, they appear to be separate wounds. In your opinion, is that an accurate opinion to reflect the true circumstances that exist between injury number 1 and injury number 2 of photo G51?
Yes, that is my opinion.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take our recess at this time, and we will not reconvene with you until Monday afternoon. Some of the parties have other commitments, and so we'll be in recess until 1:30 on Monday. Please remember, that means you can sleep in Monday morning. Please remember all of my admonitions to you. Don't discuss this case amongst yourselves. Do not form any opinions about this case. Do not conduct any deliberations till the matter has been submitted to you, and do not allow anybody to communicate with you with regard to the case. All right, have a pleasant weekend. We'll see you Monday afternoon at 1:30. Let me see Ms. Clark, Mr. Darden, Mr. Shapiro, Mr. Cochran with the court reporter, please.